Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming today. Kind of just run through a little bit of what's coming up before we get into our presentation today. So we have the Movite District Fall Meeting, October 6th through the 8th. If you're not signed up, hopefully you can get signed up. And that'll be in Springfield, Missouri. Our next meeting for the Iowa section is going to be October 20th or the 21st. We're still kind of hammering out details for that, and we're hoping it works out to meet with the Iowa student chapter. Again, we're still trying to hammer out some details there. JS. Okay, well, thank you, JS. Who's what? Okay. Yeah, thanks, John Shaw, for offering to help us out with getting a location set up. We're still working with the student chapter to figure out how that will work. So we appreciate your offer there. Beyond that, we have November 16th. The Iowa section is going to host an annual meeting. This is the day before the Traffic and Safety Forum for the Iowa Traffic and Safety Forum. So we are working together with them. We will both be up at the Gateway Hotel in Ames. Right now, our abstract or call for presentations is open. So if you would like to present at our meeting, please reach out to us. And then we are also talking with them as well. So we might coordinate that you're presenting at the Traffic and Safety Forum instead. We do have some featured speakers already invited. Andy Swisher for Movite, who's the Movite International Director. Alyssa Rodriguez, ITE International President. Beverly Kuhn, the ITE International Vice President. Jeff Paniotti, the ITE Executive Director. And then Mike Norman, Chair for the ITE Task Force on Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act Reauthorization Bill. That was a mouthful. And he's going to talk about the new bill that just came out. And I mentioned the Traffic and Safety Forum the next day. December, we are hoping to have an in-person social gathering where we do our annual Toys for Tots drive. So keep that on your keep sometime in December on your calendar. And we hope to see you there. And then we're already starting to look into next year. We haven't set anything as far as a Iowa section meeting, but Movite District has already set the spring meeting, and that's going to be April 27th, 29th through the 29th in Overland Park, Kansas. I think that takes care of our upcoming events. We are in the process of looking for volunteers. Communications director, membership chair, student chapter coordinator for the Iowa section. Please contact me if you would be interested in one of those positions. And then we are also in our call for board members for the secretary position. As you may know, most of our positions move up, so secretary gets an automatic nomination for treasurer position, treasurer automatic nomination for vice president, and so on and so forth. But you could also nominate somebody for those positions as well if you really felt the need to. And then elections will be beginning in November for that. If you have an idea for future meetings as far as topics or ideas, as I mentioned, January is still open. We haven't figured anything out for that. We would be interested in input for that. So you can reach out to board@iowaite.org. Yes, that's our last slide. I forgot if there was another one or not. So not at this time. Okay. Well, we will move into our presentation. John, would you like to open here?
Sure. We have an esteemed colleague that is joining us from Texas A&M, Kay Fitzpatrick. She's been a fixture in the transportation technology and research field for a number of years, and so I'm pleased to introduce Kay, who's going to give us some insights on a recent project that she has been the lead investigator on setting speed limits. So Kay, welcome to the Iowa section.
Thanks. Happy I was able to make it. Can I confirm that you can hear me?
We can hear you and we can see your slides.
Great. So I'm going to be talking about NCHRP 1776, which in my mind has a great number to it. And I will say that 1776 several times during the presentation. We had quite a large team. It included other members of TTI, as listed on this slide, along with Michigan State University. The objective for 1776 had two main points. The first one was to look at what is influencing operating speeds. And all of the details of our research efforts is documented in an NCHRP web-only report. Out of all of that research knowledge, we were to develop a user guide and then a spreadsheet-based tool. And the user guide and the tool are also available on the NCHRP website. And my final slide will give you the link so that you can go to the website and download the research report, the tool, and the user guide. But let me give you a little background first. There are several websites and documents giving you advice on how to set speed limits. ITE has a web page as part of their website that talks about speed limits. FHWA has a website. FHWA also sponsors the US Limits 2, which is a web-based method of identifying suggested speed limits. For those of you involved in NACTO, they have been very active with the speed limit setting issue, and they have issued some documents. However, the one document that really is used by more than any other document is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Device. The MUTCD talks about needing to do a traffic study using the 85th percentile speed, along with consideration of other factors. So once we had started 1776, I kind of feel like sometimes you can say speed limits is cyclic. There are times when it's very hot within our profession with a lot of discussion about how we should be doing it. And other times it's just not as hot. Well, in 2017, I kind of felt like it exploded, which was in the middle of the 1776 efforts. NACTA released a policy that says we need to get rid of 85th percentile. The National Transportation Safety Board released a report which included a lot of recommendations, such as removing that link between how we round our speed measures with respect to the 85th percentile. Several states have initiated state-level committees to investigate how speed limits are set within those states. California and Oregon are probably on the forefront of that. And now we are seeing a number of cities that want to have control of setting speed limits within their jurisdiction. And those cities are setting what is called citywide speed limits. So for example, Portland, Boston, Austin, Texas have all implemented citywide speed limits. Recently, just within the past year, NACTO published another report where they have their method of setting speed limits on urban streets. So there's a lot of stuff going on with respect to speed limits. As the research team was considering the form that we wanted the 1776 tool to take, I participated on a national committee task force that was looking at the recommendations from the National Transportation Safety Board. So the National Transportation Safety Board said, you need to change the MUTCD. And there is a volunteer group that provides advice to FHWA with regards to changes to the MUTCD. And that group is called the National Committee of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or NCUTCD. National Committee is kind of the shorthand that's used. So within the National Committee, there's a lot of technical committees. And one of the technical committees, the one that looks at the section that speed limits is in, formed a task force. And that task force did a survey, got a mound of responses, and based upon the survey results plus a lot of discussions within various groups, the direction recommended by the National Committee about a year ago is listed on here. Keep the MUTCD general, emphasize that other factors in addition to the 85th have a role, and to retain that closer link to 85th for the higher speed facilities, the freeways and the expressways and rural highways. Now, within the past 6 months, there's been a lot of additional discussion based upon some feedback on the FHWA release of the NPA. I'm not going to get into all of those details. Just know that there is a lot of discussion on the national level, and the next version of the MUTCD will probably be different than what's in the 2009 edition. With respect to 1776, this question really formed an impact on how we proceeded. And the question the task force asked was, how would you set the speed limits if given the choice? And we provided them answers where they could round up or round down. They can use 85th, they can use pace. But half of the respondents decided to check other and then took the time to write their response on how they think speed limits should be set. And the word cloud on the right, to me, really drives home the point that context, that we need to be setting speed limits according to the context of the road. And I would say that's one of my major talking points when I make these presentations, that there should be a connection between the methodology being used to set speed limits and the roadway context. Along with that, we had some other guiding principles. One is we wanted our user guide and tool to be to contain language about how to set speed limits that would be easy to understand. I add the word relatively on this slide because if you've had to try to explain how we set speed limits, you know that it's not easy. It's not going to be easy. Even if we go with a everywhere speed limit that all of the speeds are going to be X miles per hour, you're still going to get challenged on, well, why did you pick X instead of Y? We also wanted our tool to have consistent results and be defendable. So we wanted our user guide to document how the decision rules were set. We wanted to avoid a black box feel. We wanted you to be able to use the spreadsheet and see the relationships between the data you're entering, and the resulting suggested speed limit. We wanted our tool to be usable for all roadway types and contexts, instead of having it subdivided by rural versus urban, for example. But recognizing, as I said before, that we need to consider context, we suggest that a different set of decision rules be developed for each roadway type and context group. So it all comes back to the decision rules. And the question is, how did we develop those decision rules? Well, that was part of the 1776 project. We used information from the literature. We used guidance from key reference documents, such as the Highway Safety Manual and the Green Book. We had funds available within phase 2 of this NCHRP project for original research. And the panel agreed with us that we should put those funds towards additional investigation into the urban-suburban environment. There's a lot more knowledge for freeways and rural highways. The suburban-urban environment was a gap that we had identified. Of course, the research team's expert opinions factored into developing the decision rules, but we also got feedback from other experts, including members of our project panel. So let me talk a little bit about the 1776 research. As I said, we wanted to look at the suburban-urban environment. We had data sets from Michigan and Texas, and we focused on mid-block or non-intersection crashes. The crashes at intersections are very heavily influenced by the type of traffic control device, which could be independent of the posted speed limit. So we just focused on between intersection crashes. In Michigan, they pulled all of the roads for Washtenaw County, which includes Ann Arbor, and they removed the local streets and the freeways and just focused on the arterials and minor collectors within that county. We also limited the posted speed limits between 25 and 50. And I want to make a point that we had over 300 miles of roads within the Michigan data set. And within the Texas data set, we also had over 300 miles of roads. The unique aspect of the Austin, Texas data is that the city of Austin posted all of the traffic counts that they conducted in 2016 and 2017 on their website. So we had access to hundreds of actual speed measurements that we could look at and use. So we know what the actual operating speeds were on these roadway segments. Typically, it was a 24-hour speed count. In a few cases, it was a 2-day speed count. We had some funds available within 1776 for purchasing additional speed data. And so we collected data at another 50 or so sites, tending towards the 4-lane conditions, since the existing data set from Austin was mainly focused on 2-lane streets. So because we had operating speed for the roadways from Austin, it gave us an opportunity to do something that's kind of pretty unique within the research community so far. And that is to look at the difference between the posted speed limit and a speed measure, an operating speed measure. This graph shows posted speed limit minus average speed. We did check posted speed limit minus 85th percentile speed, but this gave kind of the cleanest relationship that I felt we could present and talk about. So when your posted speed limit equals your average speed, when you're at that 0 point, what we found is that the crash rate is is at its minimum. So this is the actual data with a trend line. In our statistical modeling, we did use the crash data and segment length and separate. For those of you who are familiar with statistical analysis with respect to safety, you don't actually use crash rate. You use number of crashes and then the exposure variables as unique variables. But the point here is that as you get closer to having your average speed and your posted speed limit the same for these urban suburban roadways, we are seeing a minimum number of crashes. So what impacts did the Michigan work and the Texas work have on our decision rules? Well, there were two variables that from the literature and from US Limits 2 that said we should be considering signal density and access density. The Michigan and Texas work supported keeping those two variables as factors to consider when setting speed limits. The Texas and Michigan work also provided evidence that we should be considering the median type and the presence of on-street parking. And that 50th percentile speed on that previous slide, that finding provided us justification to include the 50th percentile within our speed limit setting procedure. So let me talk to you about, okay, so what is this speed limit setting procedure? Basically, you start with identifying your roadway context and type. And once you have that like a flow chart, it takes you into a unique set of decision rules. And those decision rules combine or considers the speed distribution and the known safety relationships for that particular roadway context and type. And out of that decision rule comes your suggested speed limit. So let's start with that roadway context and type. In the first column are roadway types that I suspect most of you are familiar with, freeways, arterials, collectors, and such. The roadway context, if you're closer to my age, and I've been involved in the transportation profession for, I would say, decades instead of years now. But yeah, if you're closer to my age, then you're pretty comfortable with rural and urban, and the acceptance that suburban is in there as well. Well, another NCHRP project looked at roadway context, and their recommendation is that we actually go to 5 groups, and we include rural, town, and urban core. I have seen in recent times that there's discussion of going to a 6th group, a commercial industrial, and I know some states have many more context types within their jurisdiction. So the columns are kind of changing quickly, but for NCHRP 1776, we moved forward with these 5 roadway contexts. So 5 roadway types, 5 roadway contexts gives you a matrix of 25 cells. As we started to develop the decision rule for each of those 25 cells, we figured out pretty early that the way you're setting speed limits on freeways and a suburban and an urban is pretty similar. And so we ended up coming up with 4 speed limit setting groups that you can see on this slide. So with these speed limit setting groups, each group considers the geometric variables, human factors choice in terms of driver's speed choice and safety. And the decision rule identifies what speed distribution measure to start with. So if everything's optimal, then you start with 85th. But if things are not optimal, then you may start with 50th, and then the decision rule tells you whether to round up or to round down from that speed distribution measure. So now that we have our procedure, we needed to develop the support tool. We had some guiding principles for the tool as well. We wanted all of the data on one screen. We wanted to use color to help with knowing what had to be present and what's just supplemental information, along with being able to generate warnings if you put in a segment length of 0.001 instead of 1,000, right? That's too short, so we give you a warning message. We also wanted to have the tool be such that once you're in one of those 4 speed limit setting groups, that the tool hides the fact that if you're doing a freeway, you need ramps information, but when you're doing a city street, you need number of access points. So you don't get confused as to why it's asking for ramps if you're doing a city street. Excel macros allow us to hide the rows that are not of interest. What we've learned, though, is that there are some agencies that are not permitted to have a macro-enabled spreadsheet within their company's firewall. And so we developed a no macro version of our tool. So this is a screenshot of our tool for the full access speed limit setting group. And so as you can see, we achieved my guiding principle of having everything on one page. Luckily, you can make things bigger, right, with computers, because it ended up being a little tight, a little small on the font, but it's all there. So let's look a little closer at the top half of the spreadsheet. We are using color to help indicate that the denim and the orange are basic information. The pinks or the reds, the theme, are cells that are either the final analysis or their intermediate calculations, which you should not type over. And so in this case, we found for our full access city street that the suggested speed limit was 30 miles per hour, and the view on the right shows you how we determine that value. It used the speed data, the site characteristics, and the crash data. Depending upon what you enter, perhaps only the speed data is what influenced the generation of the suggested speed. On the bottom half of that spreadsheet is where you enter all your site characteristics. Right here, again, we use 2 colors so that you know which ones are drop-down menus and which ones you need to type in your value. And then the bottom third is the crash data. The tool does not require crash data, but it is recommended because so that you can have an appreciation for the safety on that segment as compared to your statewide averages if you input that information, or we do provide typical values from the HSIS databases. So this was a research project. So of course I had to identify some research needs, where we should go next with respect to speed limits. We were able to find, I think, some very interesting relationships for urban and suburban roadways. However, that's for one state. I'm sorry, for one city, actually. It's only for the city of Austin. And I think we need to be reproducing that analysis for other cities. We struggled quite a bit on deciding how to handle bike and ped infrastructure. I'm talking sidewalks and bike lanes, and how to handle bike and ped volumes, and whether or not the infrastructure and the activity level should be unique variables within the speed limit setting procedure. We try to have every one of our decisions be based on documented relationships prior to making decisions based on expert opinions. This is an area where we had to rely more on the experts than on documented relationships. So this is where we think there's another research need. There are several that are suggesting other speed limit setting techniques, and I think we need a comparison of how effective those, not only 1776, but these other techniques are. The number on the sign, after all is said and done, when you're doing your speed limit study, you come out with a number and you put that number on that black and white sign. That number, I think, does have an impact on drivers. However, it doesn't have the impact on drivers to the level that some people wish it did. I've heard plenty of stories where the citizens say, if you just sign this road at 30 instead of 40, everything will be fine. And those of you with experience would say, you change that 40 number to that 30 number, and you're not going to see a big change in the driver's speed. What research shows is you usually see about a 1.5 mile per hour change for every 5 mile per hour change on your sign. So to get the speeds from that 40 to that 30, we need other speed management tools or techniques, speed feedback signs, a complete redesign of the roadway. There are other techniques, and we need to identify them, and we need to document their effectiveness. So this is my final slide. This is the website that has the research report, which is that very long document that contains all of the nitty-gritty details of the research efforts. What you will probably be more interested is in the user guide. We tried to keep it about 100 pages. It provides information not only on the tool, but some discussion on speed limit issues. And then towards the bottom of this web page are the two tools, the with macro and the without macro versions. And so, John, with that, I'm ready to answer some questions.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
We had to turn off our microphone because Rob was eating his cookie and we didn't want to make you too hungry.
I appreciate that.
So I guess my first question, well, first of all, thank you, Kay, for your fine presentation as always. I guess the one question I had just to start off, and I haven't seen anything in the chat yet, and to kind of let those folks here in person to contemplate their questions. What do you see as some next steps, or do you see training coming out of this to help the practitioners utilize the guide in addition to the additional research that you're going to see in the areas?
So a couple things are happening. I know in the Pacific Northwest, there are some counties that are using this tool and this procedure, and they're customizing it to reflect their area. And so we did try to develop this so that it's flexible and can be updated with new knowledge, and that new knowledge being the roadway types and context used in a particular region seems a good idea to me. There's been a comment asking if we can put the website. So here's the website. Yes, I can put that in the chat.
All right. Anyone here in person have a question that they would like to ask?
Okay, so there is a question from Stephen.
All right.
So the question, I assume, is going back to this. I sometimes call it the perfect purple graph. Yes, this was statistically significant, the relationship between the difference in posted speed and average speed and crashes. If your question is focused more on is it fatal and injury versus R severity levels, what we had decided to do was we focused only on what's known as KABC. The CAPCO severity level classification has K for kill, A, B, C are different levels of severity injury, and then O being property damage only. And so KABC means we did not include property damage only crashes. So yes, the statistical relationship was between that posted speed limit minus average speed and fatal and injury crashes. So the question is, have there been any comparison of the results of the 1776 speed limits with other algorithms or guidelines? We did some checks as we were developing the procedure and the tool. So I know that there are differences. I know we have differences with, say, US Limits 2, because we've updated some of the assumptions in US Limits 2 with newer information and insights from research. Now, whether what NACTO is recommending versus what 1776 would recommend, which one is better, I think that's for future research to investigate that type of research question.
Hi, Kay. This is Jennifer McCoy here. I want to thank you for all your help on that Minnesota project. I know we've been talking a lot about 1776. I was hoping it'd come out with a lot more fanfare, and I'm glad to hear you talk about it today. One of the questions I had is there's been a lot of discussion about the safe systems approach for communities, seeing this approach up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, other areas. And I was wondering, do you feel that your research here has a place in helping to guide some of those more systematic looks at speed limits for cities, or is it really just kind of for use on a street-by-street basis?
The tool is a site-by-site basis. So you would have to go into the logic encoded in the speed limit setting tool to apply it to a region, which I actually think would be something that would be pretty neat to be able to do. Things are growing, improving in terms of our databases of roadway characteristics. And I feel like we should get to the point where we could actually have all of the necessary data within a database, and then that information being pulled into a tool that gives you what the suggested speed limit should be. And then to use that to identify locations, perhaps, where there's a safety concern, or locations where there's an enforcement need. I mean, I think all of us know it is very challenging to manage speed. The pandemic has revealed that when enforcement is less, say in the months immediately following the work from home restrictions, speeds went very high, both on freeways and on city streets. So if anyone had any doubt as to the value of enforcement, just look at the average speeds for facilities in April of 2020. So I feel like this is only a part of the solution that we need to be able to manage speed. A part of that solution that is really, really hard is we have to change our roadway designs. There are streets that look like you can land an airplane on them. So is there any reason why we shouldn't be expecting speeds over 30 and 40 miles per hour? So roadway design is expensive. Redesigning a road is hard in terms of convincing the community that this is the way it needs to be if we want the types of speeds we are asking for. So I think I'll get off of my soapbox and see if there's any other questions.
All right, we've got one in the back.
Hi, thank you. I had wondered if you could say any more about the rural town part in your kind of 5x5 grid and the 4 groups that came out of there. I assume that means maybe like a rural or a small town segment along what's a longer, more rural highway. And so I wondered if that got into whether you needed kind of transition speeds, like an intermediate speed limit between your 55 to whatever's in the town. And if anything specifically with that, since that was kind of a new category.
There, you may want to look at NCHRP report 855. That is a report that gives those additional details as to what do the each roadway contexts mean. And in our user guide, we just reproduced some of the 855 graphics because we focused on the procedure, and we decided to leave the debate about context to others. So this is, I'm showing the 966 user guide. And so we included information on density land use setback for the rural town, along with some discussion as to what it contains. And here's the reference to NCHRP 855. The 1776 tool does have some scope in terms of it was not designed to be used for school zones or advisory speeds, along with transition areas. There is quite a number of reports that do get into how to handle transition areas. And and so in our user guide, we have a section that focuses on other reference materials that can be used to help with aspects of setting speed limits. For example, the NCHRP 500 gives you some ideas on speed limits and speed management. This is the FHWA website, which is the most recently updated that we found on speed management. So all of this is part of the tool, part of the user guide. Of course, this document includes discussion about how to use the tool, which are the Excel spreadsheets. So has anyone tried to download either of these tools, those that are on virtual? Because the last time I gave this presentation, there were some issues with the Without Macro tool not being linked properly. So I'm just curious if anyone has attempted to connect to it. And I see that John says yes, and it's working. That's good.
All right, any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat. If there's no other questions, Kay, thank you again for joining us from Texas or wherever you might be. You might be in Hawaii or the Bahamas. I'm not sure.
Oh, that wasn't. Yeah, no. I'm in my house in College Station, Texas.
All right.
Where it's like 100 degrees.
Well, we thank you for joining us from beautiful College Station, and with that, I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Yes, thanks again, Kay, and thanks everybody for attending today, whether in person or virtual. As I mentioned, I kind of just run through a couple of little things. Movite fall meeting is October 6th through the 8th, and then our next meeting we are shooting for October 20th or 21st, and we look forward to seeing you there if we don't see you prior. Okay. Oh, yeah. We are taking nominations for our secretary position, as well as if you would like to help out as communications director, membership director, and with our student chapter coordination. Thanks for the reminder, Doug. Okay, well, again, thanks for coming and have a good day today.